Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast for the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society. I'm your host and the media director for the society, Sven Hosford. Today, we're going to be talking with the executive director, Patrick Nightingale, Esquire, and he's with us here right now. Hi, Patrick. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Sven. Thank you very much for having me on and giving me a chance to talk to our listeners.
Well, I think it's a good thing to have you on and really help set the tone for what we do here at the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society. But I know this is a pretty timely podcast, and we want to keep everybody up to date. So the first question we always have to ask is, what's the current state of the legislation? Where does it sit right now, and how close are we to having a signed bill?
As we know, Senate Bill 3 passed the Senate in early 2015 with 80% support. 40 senators voting in favor, 7 voting against, and 3 abstaining. Since that time, however, our legislation has stalled in the House of Representatives. Once the bill passed out of the Senate, it was assigned to the Health Committee in the Pennsylvania House, chaired by Matt Baker, a very conservative Republican. And Chairman Baker simply refused to move the bill through his committee. He did hold 3 hearings on the bill, but made it clear that he had absolutely no intention of calling the bill for a vote in his committee, despite up to close to 85, 87% support in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A few months ago, a representative out of Philadelphia tried a procedural maneuver to force an up and down vote on the House floor. That maneuver failed, but the bill was taken out of Representative Baker's committee and assigned to the Rules Committee, chaired by Majority Leader Dave Reed from Indiana. Since that time, Representative Reed put together a working group of Republicans and Democrats to try to craft language that would allow the legislation to move through the House. Right now, that working group has made a number of recommendations for the House to consider. And quite frankly, a number of those recommendations are very, very concerning and worrisome to us, such as arbitrary THC caps on medicinal cannabis products and having an advisory board made up in part of law enforcement, prosecutors, and addiction specialists, but mysteriously not permitting any patients advocates or patients representatives on that board. We wait for the House to formally come forward with its recommendations and whether or not they are going to vote on Senate Bill 3, whether or not they're going to craft their own legislation to send back to the Senate, or whether they're simply going to allow this to wither and die, which honestly we're concerned might be the preference of Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai.
So if anybody wants to get involved with contacting their congressman, who should we be directing our calls and letters to?
Majority Chair Dave Reed from Indiana County, and the Speaker of the House, Mike Turzai, Bradford Woods, Allegheny County. Quite literally, this is solely in the hands of Speaker Turzai. If Speaker Turzai agrees to move this legislation, it will move forward. It will move forward. If he refuses to do so, it will die. I know that a lot of people are frustrated that this does not seem fair. It doesn't seem like democracy when we have 90% public support in favor of medicinal cannabis, according to the most recent Quinnipiac poll. But Speaker Turzai seems to be tone deaf relative to this. Is it because of the budget? Is it because of other issues? Is it because he's just hostile to the concept of medicinal cannabis? We are not sure right now, but we know if he refuses to move this legislation forward, we are dead.
Do you think it's in any way tied up with the current budget battle that's going on?
I think it's impossible to say it plays no role whatsoever. The budget battle is getting nasty. Republicans and the Wolf administration are at loggerheads. Would a Republican political leader be willing to give what could be perceived as a victory to the Wolf administration by giving him a medicinal cannabis bill to sign? The possibility certainly exists. And that's one of the things that I think is very, very frustrating to sick Pennsylvanians who are waiting day in and day out for some good news about when medicinal cannabis products may be legally available here in the Commonwealth.
Because the governor has said he will sign a bill that comes across his desk. So
yes.
We know this is the last holdup right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Governor Wolf has been an ally in this. He has made clear that he supports medicinal cannabis and will sign a bill if it comes to his desk. We need to ensure, and by we I mean the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society, the activists, the patients, we need to make sure that the bill that gets to the governor's desk is worth the effort and worth him signing it.
Well, and let's talk about that. You mentioned that some of the things that were troubling about some of the changes that they want to put in there. And I think we should start by saying who we represent as the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society. So talk about who it is that we actually are representing and some of the goals of our organization.
Ultimately, we represent Pennsylvania patients, Pennsylvania physicians, Pennsylvania business interests who want to come together in this emerging marketplace to provide high quality medicinal cannabis products to patients at the most affordable price point. The most important thing to remember about this is patient participation in this program is critical. It's essential. The only way a medicinal cannabis program will be successful in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is if patients here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania sign up for the program and participate in the program. And there are a number of factors that can affect that. For example, qualifying conditions. Will a medicinal cannabis bill be robust enough to include the majority of patients here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who could benefit from medicinal cannabis? Our legislature, for example, has, at least some of them, have been very critical about the concept of treating chronic neuropathic pain with cannabis. They seem to think that it is some backdoor for recreational use, but ignoring the fact that the only treatment alternative right now for chronic neuropathic pain are addictive opiates such as OxyContin and fentanyl. Other concerns that we have is that artificial caps placed on medicinal cannabis products. We have already been told, for example, that smoking will not be part of this bill and that plant material may not even be permitted to be distributed to patients. If patients are not able to access a cannabis product that will help them with their particular condition, then why are they going to be participating in this program? For example, if the only medicinal cannabis product available to sick Pennsylvanians will be an extracted oil, and you suffer from severe nausea secondary to either chemotherapy or HIV/AIDS treatment, ingesting something is not a reasonable option for you, and therefore you would have no reason to participate in this program. And the final concern, or significant concern to bring up at this point, is the end cost of that medicinal cannabis products. We believe that under no circumstances whatsoever should medicinal cannabis products be somehow tied to the cost of black market recreational cannabis. We have seen in New Jersey, for example, that ounces of medicinal cannabis cost $500. It is cheaper to buy illegal black market cannabis in New Jersey than it is to participate in the program. So why would a New Jersey patient who does not have insurance coverage to coverage medicinal cannabis, spend 50% more potentially of their monthly allotment for their medicine to participate in the program? Those are some of our real concerns, and those are some of the issues that we believe as a society we can be effective in addressing with both physicians, business interests, and patients to make sure that this program ultimately benefits Pennsylvania patients.
How much in the legislation battle that's going on do you think that the voice of doctors is being heard?
I think that the only voice that is being heard comes from the Pennsylvania Medical Society, which has raised its voice in opposition. It seems that when our legislature hears a testimony from a doctor from Colorado, for example, or a doctor from another part of the state, for example, they look at that testimony with a jaundiced eye. But then here comes the Pennsylvania Medical Society saying, well, wait a minute, we're a little bit concerned about this because there are no studies showing the efficacy of medical cannabis. Suddenly, that very factually incorrect statement is taken at face value. It is very, very frustrating. We unfortunately cannot bring in, UPMC physician after UPMC physician talking about how they would like this treatment option available, because they could face, professional and employment issues because of that.
So, well, let's talk about then what our goal as the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society is to help raise the bar, help raise the level of education, help people understand that this is not even arguable, the efficacy of medical cannabis.
That is entirely accurate. We have, I would submit, given the fact that cannabis remains a Schedule I controlled substance federally, we have what I would consider to be an almost overwhelming amount of scientific evidence, medical evidence, anecdotal evidence by far, and a wide variety of clinical studies of the type that the FDA would use when evaluating a new substance for FDA approval. To deny this science, to suggest that it is somehow insufficient to justify treating cannabis as a potential medical treatment makes no sense whatsoever and defies logic. Yeah. What our goal is to bring this information to Pennsylvania physicians, to bring this to Pennsylvania treatment providers and say, listen, we understand that you are reluctant to consider treatment options that you have not been educated about, that you have not been trained about, that you might not fully understand the pharmacology of the treatment. And we want to help you understand why medicinal cannabis may be an effective treatment option for you to consider with your patient. We are not here to tell doctors how to treat their patients. We are not here to claim that medicinal cannabis is a panacea or a cure-all. We are here to show that it has been proven to have medical efficacy for a wide variety of conditions and disorders, some very serious disorders such as seizure disorder, chronic neuropathic pain, digestive disorders, and the list goes on and on. And we are here to show Pennsylvania physicians that there is a non-toxic treatment alternative that has been shown to be efficacious in countless studies and in countless patients across the United States of America. But ultimately, of course, it's up to that physician and their professional judgment, knowing their patient and their patient's medical history, to decide whether or not to recommend cannabis as a treatment option. But we want to add that treatment option to that quiver of arrows that physician has when deciding how best to help their patient.
So in one way, we're kind of acting as the pharmaceutical sales reps in a way that can help educate doctors on specific things. But also, one of the things we want to make sure of is that the businesses related to this are all adhering to the highest levels of professionalism, standards, and compliance. You were just in Colorado. Talk a little bit about what you saw there and how that could be of use for us here in Pennsylvania.
You mentioned a word towards the end of your question that was what struck me the most when I was in Colorado, and that is compliance. The importance of compliance. The importance of having a well-regulated industry with a serious effort placed on compliance to show regulators that the industry itself is serious about self-regulation, that the industry is not merely a shill or a front for some type of black market distribution of illegal cannabis, and through compliance to ensure that the highest quality products are ultimately making its way to the patient. We are looking at a licensing system here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that would permit a limited number of growing licenses, a limited number of processing licenses, and a limited number of dispensary licenses. One of the things that we have heard in criticism is that there is a concern that license holders may engage in illegal distribution of cannabis, diversion. When I posed this question to license holders in Colorado, they looked at me with somewhat of a bemused look and said, listen, the licenses are far too expensive and far too difficult to obtain to risk losing it over something so stupid as diversion. And it's that type of model, I think, that can effectively show our legislators, our prosecutors, our law enforcement here that the industry can be trusted to take regulation and compliance very, very seriously. For example, when I was in Colorado, we visited a commercial greenhouse grow. There were approximately 30 high-definition surveillance cameras with real-time feeds going to Colorado's Marijuana Enforcement Division. Every single plant had a radio frequency tag on the stalk that was placed on the plant as soon as it was taken out of the clone room and set into the vegetation room to start growing. These types of tracking, real-time tracking with a real-time access to the enforcement division is a model that can easily be brought from Colorado to Pennsylvania to address these, obviously legitimate concerns about diversion, and to assuage those concerns so that our regulators don't feel the need to build an overly restrictive regulatory scheme that ultimately will prevent patients from having access to reasonably priced, high-quality medicine.
What you're seeing, I think, in several states, from what I've seen so far being associated with the society here, is that the people in the business are treating this very seriously. They are very well educated, they're well funded, they're very organized, and this is a real serious industry with real serious players and people. And you don't see a whole lot of, like you say, people willing to risk their licenses, partly because there's just so much money to be made complying and just selling legally the way they are. Is that pretty much true?
Absolutely. There is a very, very successful and effective industry out there where investors and license holders are making serious money acting in strict compliance because the industry is emerging, it's active, and it's an industry that, now that it has been permitted to come up out of the shadows, is really taking its place as a major player in Colorado, in Washington, in Oregon, and it's very exciting to see that. Now, in the process, as this industry develops, obviously they're making their own mistakes along the way. For example, Colorado just had a serious pesticide scare to the point where the governor of Colorado ordered the destruction of a large number of cannabis crops because that was something necessary to protect the end consumer, and the industry itself understood how important it was to make sure that it was sending out the best quality products whatsoever to its consumers, because the cannabis consumer in Colorado, especially the medicinal cannabis consumer in Colorado, has a very high expectation and demand for the quality of the product that is coming from the businesses. And if they're not delivering that, then those businesses have already gone under. They've already lost their licenses.
So that's an interesting point then. So even though it's legal for recreation in Colorado, there is still a medical cannabis industry and medical cannabis standards and practices and compliance there. Is that true?
Yes, that is very true. For example, medical cannabis in Colorado is taxed at a much lower rate than recreational cannabis. There are certain medical cannabis products, such as transdermal patches in very high dosages, which will not be available and are not sold on the recreational side of the dispensary. Some dispensaries literally have a physical dividing line between the medicinal side and the recreational side. And if you are not a Colorado Red Card holder, you cannot go to the medicinal side and take advantage of a greater variety of medicinally oriented products at a lower taxation point. And in terms of compliance, in order to ensure that people don't try to cross over to the medicinal side, as I just said earlier, there is real-time video monitoring so that that dispensary were to permit a medicinal sale to a non-red card holder would immediately face a violation, sanction, and possible loss of license.
Well, we talked a lot about some of the resistance that's still out there, but what we're seeing in Colorado is this real sophistication in the public's knowledge and awareness. And we had talked earlier about what happened in Ohio. You and I had talked about this, and you had made the point that because the Ohio recreational and full use and that whole law for medical marijuana and recreational was shot down, actually is a sign of the sophistication and the understanding of the population in Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. At first blush, when we see that issue 3 was defeated by a 2-to-1 margin, a casual observer could say, wow, Ohio must really not like the idea of legalized marijuana. And I think just the opposite was borne out. Clearly, Ohio was polling in favor of marijuana, but the issue 3, the responsible Ohio folks, they miscalculated by thinking that they could just come walking in, a knight in green armor, if you will, and say, listen, just go along with our plan and we will legalize marijuana in Ohio and everyone will be very, very happy. But when Ohioans, and especially Ohio cannabis activists, look at their plan, they realize that the plan was really a money grab for the responsible Ohio investors by carving out a sweetheart deal where only their investors get the grow licenses. It divided the activist community, and I think that it caused your average Ohio voter who is generally in favor of cannabis reform to say, I'd like to move forward with reform, but this clearly is not the right way to do it. Let's come back with something better as soon as possible.
And let's talk about one other sign of progress, and that's the U.S. Senate has passed a bill that allows wounded warriors, veterans coming back from overseas, to be able to use medical marijuana for PTSD and other things. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, the medicinal use of cannabis amongst our veterans has been something that's been evolving in the VA's mind for quite some time. A few years ago, the VA officially changed its policy and would permit veterans to utilize medicinal cannabis in medicinal cannabis states as long as it was not recommended by a VA physician. Medicinal use of cannabis wouldn't result, for example, in your automatically being terminated from a Veterans Administration program, such as it would here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the Senate legislation is, getting to the point of codifying, of making this official, this emerging progressive position on the part of the Veterans Administration. And I can tell you that here in Pennsylvania and across the country, veterans are desperate for treatment options other than some of the prescribed narcotics that they get from the Veterans Administration. Just recently, the Weed for Warriors project went to Washington, D.C. on Veterans Day and dumped thousands of empty pill bottles, demanding access to a non-toxic treatment alternative that many say for them was literally the difference between life and death.
Wow. Well, we've covered a lot here on our first podcast, Patrick. Is there anything else that you think we missed that we should talk about?
Yeah, for people interested in the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society and what we're bringing to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, come to our events, PAMCS.org. We're working hand in hand with activists, patients, physicians, and with our legislature. And we believe that together, the cannabis community here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can speak with a collective voice and bring an effective medicinal cannabis program to PA. Thank you very much, Sen.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate you being with us. And thanks for watching, everybody. And check us out again next time. I'm the Media Director for the Pennsylvania Medical Cannabis Society, Sven Hosford. We've been talking with Executive Director Patrick Nightingale. We'll see you again next time.